ADHD and narcissists, how your executive dysfunction gets weaponized. Welcome back to the mechanics of toxic relationships. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been called lazy, unreliable, too emotional, too forgetful, too messy, too much, by someone who somehow had no problem using every single one of those things against you? Because this is where ADHD and narcissistic relationships get fucking dangerous. Not because ADHD makes you weak. It doesn't. ADHD does not make you stupid. It does not make you broken. It does not make you defective. But it can make you easier to destabilize if someone knows where the buttons are. And narcissistic people love buttons. They don't want a relationship. They want a control panel. And if you've got ADHD, mate, they find that panel like a dodgy mechanic finding a loose earth fault. They don't fix it. They wiggle it until the whole system starts glitching. Today we're talking about how your executive dysfunction gets weaponized, because the toxic person doesn't just hurt your feelings. They learn your wiring. They learn where you forget, where you freeze, where you panic, where you overexplain, where you lose time, where you feel shame. And then they use it, not always with some evil mastermind plan, but consistently enough that the result is the same. You end up feeling like the problem, when really they just learned how to make your nervous system look guilty. That's the hook. A DHD already makes life harder in certain areas. Time management, task switching, memory, emotional regulation, prioritizing, starting things, finishing things, keeping track of bills, messages, appointments, objects, passwords, forms, and all the other boring adult bullshit that apparently never ends. Then you add a narcissistic partner into that system, and suddenly every ADHD struggle becomes evidence, not support. Evidence? Forgot something? You don't care. Running late? You're selfish? Overwhelmed? You're unstable? Messy? You're useless? Need clarification? You're exhausting. Ask the same question twice and you never listen. Mate, that's not love. That's someone turning your symptoms into prosecution material. That's the first brutal truth. In a healthy relationship, your ADHD is something you work with. In a toxic relationship, your ADHD becomes a weapon they aim at you. And they'll do it in ways that are hard to explain, because on paper it looks like they're just frustrated. But in reality, they're building a case. One forgotten task at a time, one missed message at a time, one emotional reaction at a time, one messy room at a time. Until eventually the story becomes, you're impossible, you're unreliable, you're the problem, and the fucked part. You might believe them, because ADHD already comes with enough shame. Most people with ADHD have spent years hearing some version of, try harder, focus, pay attention, stop being lazy. Why can't you just do it? So when a narcissistic person says the same shit, it lands somewhere old. It hits the wound that was already there, and they know it. That's why the shame works so well. They don't have to invent a new insecurity, and they just plug into the old wiring, like finding an exposed wire under the dash and acting shocked when the lights flicker. Let's talk about forgetfulness. A DHD forgetfulness is not lack of care. It's not disrespect. It's not proof you don't love someone. It's working memory being a temperamental little bastard. You can care deeply and still forget the thing. You can love someone and still walk into a room and forget why the fuck you're there. You can have every intention of replying to a message, then 3 hours vanish into the ADHD Bermuda Triangle. That's real. But in a narcissistic relationship, forgetfulness becomes moral failure. They don't say, hey, how can we make this easier? They say, you obviously don't care. If it mattered, you'd remember? You always do this. And now you're not solving a memory problem, you're defending your character. That's the switch. The issue stops being practical, it becomes personal. And once it becomes personal, you're in the mud. Because now you're apologizing for being wired differently. You're explaining, over-explaining, promising to do better, making systems, making lists, trying harder. And then when one thing slips again, Boom, more evidence. The court reconvenes, same judge, same prosecutor, same shit sentence. Let's talk about time blindness. ADHD time is a fucking scam. 5 minutes can feel like 30 seconds. 30 seconds can feel like a prison sentence. A task you think will take 10 minutes somehow eats 3 hours, 2 coffees, and your will to live. That's time blindness. But to a narcissistic partner, that becomes, you're inconsiderate. You don't respect my time. You're selfish. You always make everything about you. Now, yes, being late can affect people. That's real, but there's a difference between addressing the problem and using the problem to crush someone's identity. A healthy partner says, let's build a system. A toxic partner says, this proves who you are. That's the difference. One helps calibrate the engine, the other kicks the bonnet and calls the car a piece of shit. And ADHD, people often respond by panicking. You start rushing, apologizing before anything even happens, checking the time obsessively, feeling guilty for existing 5 minutes behind the rest of humanity. And the narcissist loves that because now time becomes another leash. They don't have to control you directly. They just make you terrified of disappointing them. That's control with a stopwatch. Let's talk about emotional regulation. ADHD emotions can hit hard, fast, big, immediate. You don't just get annoyed, you get launched. You don't just feel rejected. You feel like someone dropped your nervous system off a cliff and told it to land gracefully. And that's not drama, that's intensity. But in a narcissistic relationship, they learn how to trigger it. They know which comment will land, which silence will make you spiral, which smirk will set fire to your insides, which little nothing's wrong will make your brain start doing forensic analysis at midnight. And then when you react, they point. There, see? You're unstable. You're aggressive. You're too emotional. You always overreact. Mate, that's like poking a pressure washer hose until it bursts and then blaming the hose for being dramatic. You created the pressure. Don't act shocked when something sprays. This is reactive abuse with ADHD turbo bolted on because your nervous system may react faster, louder, more visibly. And they can use that. They stay calm. You look emotional, they deny, you get louder, and they smirk, you snap. Now they've got the screenshot, the audio, the story, the proof. Not proof of what they did, proof of how you reacted after being pushed. That's the setup. And with ADHD, this is extra dangerous because your reaction can become the only part anyone sees. Nobody sees the silent treatment before it. Nobody sees the baiting. Nobody sees the weird tension. Nobody sees the lie. Nobody sees the slow drip of disrespect. They just see the moment you finally lose your shit and suddenly you're the problem. That's why emotional regulation becomes a battlefield, not because your emotions are wrong, because someone learned how to weaponize the volume knob. Let's talk about task paralysis. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of ADHD. You can have something important to do, know it matters, feel stressed about it, want to do it, and still not start. Not because you're lazy, because your brain is sitting in neutral, revving like an idiot, refusing to engage gear. That's executive dysfunction. But in a toxic relationship, task paralysis becomes, you're useless. You never follow through. I have to do everything. You're like a child. You make my life harder. And yes, practical responsibilities matter. Bills matter. Chores matter. Adult obligations matter. But again, there's a difference between support and contempt. Support sounds like, let's break this down. Let's do the first step. What system helps you? Contempt sounds like, you're pathetic. And narcissistic people love contempt because it positions them above you. Now they're the competent one, the responsible one, the long-suffering one, and you're the chaotic burden. Even if behind the scenes, you're the one carrying half the emotional weight, fixing their messes, paying the bills, managing the fallout, and trying to hold life together with duct tape and caffeine. That's the dirty little trick. They highlight your visible dysfunction while hiding their invisible destruction. Your missed appointment becomes a headline. Their emotional sabotage becomes background noise. Fuck that. Let's talk about rejection, sensitivity. A ADHD rejection sensitivity can be brutal, a tone shift, a delayed reply, a weird facial expression, a tiny change in energy, and your brain goes, danger. They're leaving. You've done something wrong. Fix it. Now imagine being with someone who regularly withdraws affection, goes cold, sighs, gives one-word replies, acts different but says nothing's wrong. That is gasoline on ADHD rejection sensitivity. They don't even have to yell. They just change the temperature in the room. Now you're chasing, checking, asking, apologizing, trying to repair something they won't even name. That's containment. You become responsible for decoding their mood, and the narcissistic person gets a beautiful little benefit. They don't have to communicate. They just have to create atmosphere. You do the rest like a car with a mystery rattle that only happens when the mechanic's not in it. You keep listening, keep checking, keep adjusting, and they keep saying, nah, nothing's wrong. Meanwhile, the whole thing sounds like a toolbox in a washing machine. That's how ADHD gets trapped. Your brain wants resolution. Your nervous system wants safety. The narcissist gives neither. They give uncertainty, and uncertainty is addictive to an ADHD brain. Not good addictive, not fun addictive, more like emotional pokies. Maybe today they'll be warm. Maybe today they'll explain. Maybe today it'll go back to how it was. Pull the lever, lose again. Pull the lever, tiny win. Lose again, that's intermittent reinforcement. And ADHD brains can get hooked hard on inconsistent reward. Because dopamine, because novelty, because intensity, because the relationship feels alive even when it's killing you. That's one of the ugliest truths. Sometimes toxic relationships don't feel boring, they feel urgent, and ADHD brains can confuse urgent with important, chaos with chemistry, relief with love, repair with intimacy. That's why the good moments feel so powerful. Because your nervous system has been starving, so when they finally give you warmth again, it feels like oxygen, but it isn't oxygen. It's a small hit of supply before the next withdrawal. Hope rationing, just enough good to keep you there, not enough to actually fix anything. Now let's talk about overexplaining. A DHD, people often overexplain because your brain is trying to be accurate. You want contact, you want fairness, you want the other person to understand the whole picture. So you give details, too many details. Backstory, intent, clarification, corrections, footnotes, emotional appendices, a full fucking parliamentary inquiry into why you forgot to put the bins out. And narcissistic people love this because over-explaining gives them material. Every extra detail becomes another thing to twist. Another side road, another accusation, another loophole. Now you're no longer discussing the original issue. You're defending sentence 3 from 6 minutes ago. That's how word salad starts. You hand them a map. They turn it into a maze. And because you want to be understood, you keep explaining. But the problem isn't lack of information, the problem is bad faith. They're not confused, they're using confusion. That's why the solution is not explain better. The solution is stop feeding the machine, shorter, cleaner, less access, less emotional detail. Because some people don't listen to understand, they listen to reload. Let's talk about mess and organization. ADHD spaces can get messy fast. Not because you love chaos, because object permanence and task switching are out here acting like drunk apprentices. You put something down, it disappears from your brain. You start cleaning one thing, find another thing, start that. Then suddenly you're reorganizing a drawer from 2017 while the original job sits there judging you. That's ADHD. But in a toxic relationship, mess becomes character assassination. You're disgusting. You're irresponsible. You're impossible to live with. You never help. But here's what they won't mention. They may create chaos too. Emotional chaos, financial chaos, relational chaos, drama with friends, unpaid bills, addictions, lies, mood swings. But because your mess is visible and their chaos is relational, yours gets used as evidence. That's the scam. A pile of laundry becomes a moral failure, while their lies get treated like stress. No, mate. Laundry is laundry. Lies are lies. Do not let someone compare your executive dysfunction to their lack of integrity. One is neurological, the other is character. Big difference. Let's talk about shame. This is the fuel source. Narcissistic people don't need to control every detail if they can keep you ashamed. Because shame makes you self-police. You start doing their work for them. You beat yourself up. You apologize too fast. You accept crumbs. You tolerate disrespect because part of you thinks, maybe they're right. Maybe I am hard to love. That's the poison. And ADHD, people can carry a lifetime of feeling like they're too much and not enough at the same time. Too loud, too forgetful, too scattered, too intense, too emotional, not organized enough, not consistent enough, not normal enough. So when a narcissistic person frames themselves as the one putting up with you, it lands. And fuck that. You are not lucky someone tolerates you. You are not a defective project. You are not an unpaid internship in being loved. You are a person with a nervous system that needs understanding, structure, honesty, and safety. Not contempt, not control, not someone using your wiring as a weapon, the mechanic's view. A ADHD is like driving a high-powered car with a sensitive throttle, touchy steering, and a dash full of warning lights that don't always explain themselves properly. It can be brilliant, fast, creative, responsive, alive, but it needs the right driver, the right setup, and a system that understands how it runs. A healthy partner helps you tune it. A narcissistic partner keeps tapping the throttle, pulling fuses, disconnecting sensors, and then pointing when the engine starts running rough. See, it's broken. No, mate, you've been fucking with it. That's the difference. They don't help regulate the system. They exploit the instability. They don't build routines with you. They mock you when routines fail, and they don't clarify, that they confuse, they don't support, they document. And then when you finally burn out, they say, see, I told you they were unstable. That's not partnership. That's sabotage with a witness statement. Brutal truth. Your ADHD was not the reason they abused you, but it may have been one of the things they learned how to use. Your forgetfulness, your intensity, your need to explain, your rejection sensitivity, your time blindness, your shame, your hope, your willingness to keep trying. They didn't create the wiring, but they learned where to pull on it. And healing means you stop handing people the wiring diagram. You stop explaining every vulnerable part of yourself to someone who keeps using it like a fault-finding chart. You stop calling contempt frustration. You stop calling emotional punishment communication. You stop accepting someone's cruelty just because your symptoms made you feel guilty. Because the right person won't weaponize your ADHD. They'll work with you. They'll tell the truth. They'll help build systems. They'll hold boundaries without humiliating you. They'll address problems without turning your entire identity into a defect. That's the difference. Final one-liner. If someone uses your ADHD to make you feel unlovable, they're not helping you manage symptoms. They're using your wiring to hotwire control. Until next time, look after yourself.